Hi, my name is Caroline Poland, and I'm the founder and CEO of Poland and Associates Consulting. And today I want to talk a little bit about grief during COVID-19. So one of the questions that I have been asked repeatedly over the last couple weeks is, what can we do to help grieve well in this time? So I've broken this down into categories, and again, these are just ideas. So this idea of being a very curious observer and curious noticer that I've talked about in other videos will be very important here too. Noticing what works well for your kids, what works well for you. You want to really notice what your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, and your body sensations are doing, so that you know what is helpful, what's productive, and what might not be productive. So these are just ideas, but by all means use your creativity to figure out what might work best for you. So what can we do? Well, for young kids, they're not going to be able to understand things the way that we would as an adult. They don't necessarily understand, that the fact that they don't get to go to preschool or kindergarten is minor in comparison to what's going on in the world. And we really want to teach them how to engage with those emotions. We don't want to shame them for having those emotions, because the reality is that they're going to experience grief many times in their life. So if we can teach them how to productively and healthfully deal with that now, then they'll be able to utilize that in the future. So kids aren't necessarily able to communicate their emotions and experiences the way that we would as an adult, but they are really good storytellers, and a lot of kids really enjoy working with their hands, drawing and creating things. And so for little kids, one option might just be to ask them to draw. If you were at school right now, what would you be doing? Do you want to draw a picture of that? Do you want to draw something with you hanging out with a friend? Giving them some of those prompts and then just letting them go. Kids also do a great job of telling stories through their toys, and so asking them maybe to tell a story about what their favorite stuffed animal is experiencing right now might actually lead them to sharing something with you that they wouldn't have been able to share if you just asked them how they were feeling. For middle schoolers or later elementary age kids, a lot of them really do enjoy creating stories as well. And so asking if they want to draw and write a story, or to create something with Legos, or something else that they enjoy doing with their hands might be a way for them to begin to experience some of that emotion in a different way. For high schoolers or adults, giving writing and journaling prompts could be really helpful. So write a letter to the virus. What would you want to say to it? Write a letter to your post-pandemic self. Have a self in the future, 5 years from now, write back to the you of today that is at home from the stay-at-home orders or in quarantine. So writing letters from one part of yourself to another might be really healthy. For seniors, just being able to write a note to the part of you that is graduating, and being able to express what you're proud of or disappointed for, things like that are really helpful. Another idea for adults is to actually draw with your non-dominant hand. And what that does is it allows us to get out of that thinking side of our brain and allows us to connect a lot more with that emotion side of our brain. And so drawing with our non-dominant hand is a way to process some of the emotion that we're experiencing in a different way. Again, for seniors or those of you who are ending a sports season early, or maybe a sports career, compiling a picture slideshow or a movie slideshow, creating something in iMovie might be a really helpful way to, again, just do something that allows you to externalize some of those things that you're experiencing and to actually engage in a grieving activity. So here are a few takeaways for you. I think it's important to remember that we are built for community, and therefore we are not meant to grieve alone. And so figuring out a way to be creative and get your community involved in grief, as long as they're a safe and healthy person within that community who's going to be supportive of you, how can your friends help support you in that grief? And you're always going to find someone whose loss is worse than yours. And so I want to encourage you to not discount what you're experiencing just because someone might have it worse. I think sometimes as adults that's somewhat easy to do with kids, just because maybe what a kid is experiencing is minor compared to what we know the rest of the world is experiencing. But again, our feelings are valid, and we need to be able to lean into those feelings and process those feelings. And so we want to support support the people in our community who are processing their feelings, and just ask them what we can do to be helpful in that regard. When we lean into our grief, we're able to get very curious about it, we're able to work through it, and essentially to metabolize that grief. So we really want to be intentional about the activities that we're choosing, and just to be able to sit with it. I think a lot of times we fear the emotions that we experience, and so we try to shove them away and push them down, disconnect from them or dissociate from them. The reality is that these emotions still impact us even if they're pushed below the surface. And so the best thing that we can do is walk alongside that emotion, lean into it, sit with it, and figure out what it needs in order to regulate and essentially to metabolize that grief. Again, I really want to encourage you to be compassionate to yourself during this time. Grieving is hard work. Sitting in grief and not knowing what's going to happen, and all the uncertainty and unsteadiness as this rug has been pulled out from under us, is hard. So it's easy to be hard on ourselves and to try to expect a lot from us. Maybe we have some internalized voices from other people in our lives. But what I really want to encourage you to do is be compassionate as you sit with that grief and as you learn to regulate it and give that grieving part what it needs. For those of you who are grieving, there are several different resources that I use often in my own counseling practice, and the first one would be C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed. This is his own journey of grief, so this book is an excellent resource. For those of you who might be of faith, this book, A Grace Disguised by Jerry Sitzer, is an excellent resource. And then David Kessler, who is one of the leading experts on grief in the United States, just wrote this book called Finding Meaning, which he would identify as the 6th stage of grief. And his website also is grief.com, and I would really encourage you to go visit there if you are struggling with grief, and just be able to process some of that in a healthy way, in a research-backed way. So during this time, I would just encourage you again to be compassionate with yourself as you grieve, but really to look and frame what you're experiencing as grief so that you're able to process that and give yourself what you need during this time. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Poland & Associates, and I will be continuing to post videos here during this time on strategies to stay mentally healthy.